Let's start with, as best you can tell, realistically, what would tax reform look like?
You know, so I think it's actually going to be a mix of what those of us that spend a lot of time thinking about tax policy would call tax reform and tax relief, right? So I think you're going to see some things that are done permanently, and then some other things that because of the way in which this is going to happen through something called budget reconciliation, using a simple majority in the Senate, so it won't be subject to a filibuster. You know, if some Democrats vote for it, that's helpful. Heidi Heitkamp, for example, on the plane with the president today, but at least setting up a process where they could do it with just their own votes. But that means that it can't increase the deficit in the long run. In the short run, sure. In the long run, no. And that may cause certain things to have to expire or sunset, kind of like we did in 2001 with the Bush tax cuts, and then sets up a fiscal cliff 2.0 at some point down the road.
So we had Larry Summers on yesterday, former Treasury Secretary, who said that the direction they're heading right now is really not going to do much good for the U.S. economy at all, because it appears to be cuts rather than true reform, broadening the base, eliminating deductions, things like that. Do you agree with that?
So I'm not sure if I agree that it won't do anything for the economy. I mean, history is replete with examples of Congress using short-term mechanisms in times of downturn to try to boost GDP growth. But I think this is actually going to be a little bit bigger than maybe Larry's giving credit for, because I think there's going to be some structural reforms embedded in the proposal, and then some other things that will look more like temporary relief that expires. But remember, just because it's temporary on first pass doesn't mean it won't ultimately be made permanent. And again, the Bush tax cuts, perfect example of that.
Yeah, we've seen that happen before.
Yes.
But the bigger you make it, the more reform-minded you make it, doesn't it increase the difficulty of getting it through?
It does, and so there is a sweet spot, right? There is something that is too big, right, that can't get the votes, and then there is something that is so small that maybe it's easy to do, but there's not much bang for the buck. And I think part of what the Big Six are doing, and they met with the president, is trying to land that sweet spot between big enough to be meaningful, but not so big that you can't pass it.
So perfect.